Amy, I'm going to really shoot off the first question to you. I know when we put the invite together, one of the questions that kept on coming up was, has everything really changed as a result of this crisis? So I'm really going to shoot it off to you and say, has everything really changed? Or is there perhaps a different way or a different perspective to look at what's been unfolding?
Amy, I think you're on mute once again.
Okay, I will stop that. I'm trying to. I began to say that I think a lot of the ways in which we are asking questions, and by we, I mean the questions that are around us in the mainstream discourse, are trick questions right now. They are not quite the right syntax. And there are two answers. One is, well, of course not, right? Everything hasn't changed. We have been highly focused, which is our cognitive tendency as humans, to focus on one very dramatic change that has produced, need to act in particular circumstances. But if you actually, we're all sitting in a room somewhere, take a look about it and at the practices it represents, or the people or relationships it represents, or the processes or institutions that are reflected in the objects in your room, you might note how much has not changed, right? A lot has not changed, or not changed in a way that is fast and disruptive. So we're really talking about speed. The second is to pay respect to what has changed. We can't ignore the fact of a novel coronavirus pandemic, but that change was available to have happened the day before it did. It might not have happened when it did. So it was always latent in the environment. What happened had to do with our preparedness, our readiness for that change. And so the severity and speed with which it disrupted our systems and the way we live produced something serious. And because there were severe and meaningful responses required to contain it, that has meant a cascade of additional responses, which themselves are now producing waves of change, whether those are practices or government edicts, right, or things businesses have had to do, or now interactions with other events. We are seeing that climate change and extreme weather are still around us. So floods in my country, plus social distancing, and now some typhoons, and further in the part of the world into which we're speaking. So everything has not changed, but everything is also changing. And the question is, at what rate and how holistically are we prepared to see change emerging as it does? What changes is at a surprise level, perhaps.
Fantastic.
If I may add a point to that, I think Amy, what you said is absolutely right. If I can speak from the perspective of the energy sector, I think there it's very tempting to think that yes, there's a lot that seems to be changing. However, what I read into this is that the COVID crisis is only bringing into sharper focus some of the issues, some of the symptoms that already existed even before. And these symptoms have existed not just for the past few weeks or months or years, but also I think over the past decade. So just to give two examples, for instance, we have been living over the past several years in an era where demand growth, and especially electricity demand growth, has slowed down or even reversed in some cases. And we were struggling to adapt to it. Different businesses were struggling to adapt to it because now there was a dislocation between GDP growth and electricity demand growth. Now, when you have the COVID crisis, that demand drop has accelerated. There's been a very sharp fall, and businesses are now forced to confront that demand drop and what it means, therefore, for their investments, of what it means for the operation of all the assets in the power sector. So you're seeing that. Second example is that of the price of a barrel of crude. So in the oil and gas sector, or more generally in the fossil fuel sector, we just seem to be in a nightmare scenario for the oil and gas markets. However, the same symptoms have existed for several years. We have seen a rapid or a very sharp increase in volatility of of the prices of a barrel of crude. And as a result, you had also seen that conflict with the availability of substitutes, for instance, electric mobility. So there was a supply volatility coupled with a sharp demand drop over the last few years, and that has led to the erosion of the business models of oil and gas players. It has led to a very different risk scenario for their shareholders, who earlier used to expect very comfortable dividends from this sector. So this whole prognosis for the fossil fuel sector has changed dramatically, and it's not just because of COVID, but it's been sharply brought into focus by the COVID crisis.